Good? All right. You ready, Taco? All right, Taco, we're counting.
We are. I apologize. Eric, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. We're at the end of a really great ETHDenver here. I'm sure I sound like I'm in a metal band.
I think I sound like I'm in a metal band because I was smoking cigars all night. For those that don't know, my name is Player1Taco. I am the CDO of the Manifest Network, and I'm here with Eric Bravik. Eric?
Hey, nice to meet everyone.
So today we're talking about the importance of data privacy with AI agents. That's a hard topic, that is almost extinct because we give out permissions with everything we do. What's sort of the overall thought of that?
Yeah, so if you look back at the arc of history here, it's probably good to start with what the fundamental problem here is. If you look back through human history, it took hundreds of thousands of years to organize basic tool sets for humans. It took tens of thousands of years for them to organize that to a level of standardization that you could get some basic uplift. Took thousands of years to organize into standards so you could get agrarian economies, things like that. Took hundreds of years to organize into factories. Took tens of years to control all of factory output with software, and took now only years for AI to eat almost all of software. For those of you who are in the industry, I'm sure you know we've hit that inflection point of AI and AI agents where you're now getting the vast majority of your ability to produce software through AI-assisted means. So what each one of these epochs shows us from a data perspective is that more and more data is generated in each one of these at a geometrically increasing proportion. And there is a further and further separation at each of those epochs between the concepts of ownership and control. So, there's a big difference between owning your data and controlling your data. And AI agents are going to accelerate this to an extreme degree.
So you talked about an interesting piece there of ownership and control. Right now, a lot of people give up permissions to interact out of ease, connecting apps. And so they're giving up a lot of permissions for their data. What is that big difference between ownership and control?
Yeah, so this is the difference between data ownership and data sovereignty is usually what we say instead of control. Of the two, this is often misunderstood. Of the two of these, sovereignty is far more important than ownership. So we see this mistake in the set of manifest incubators all the time. We see probably 5 to 10 data privacy startups a week or so coming in to the platform. I would say 80 to 90% of them misunderstand that data ownership is really not the salient topic to solve for. It's really all about control of the data. And let me give you an example of that. So you may feel that you own the data coming off your Aura Ring, for example. Probably you have one, I have one, probably half of the people here have one, right? But ultimately, that data is not in your control. You may feel that because you own it, you should be able to derive some value from it, which is what the premise of most data privacy platforms is ownership equals value, and that value should come back to the user. But there's a fundamental misunderstanding here of the value is created by the control, and the value is created by the product cycle that only the controller can move the data through. So it's really the controller that generates the value. And so the value stream goes to the controller. And that's probably correct in that case.
But there's so many platforms today that say that I get to control and own my data through tokenization, and that AI platforms now allow me to gain value from my data. Is my data individually actually valuable?
So there are some very good platforms in this space. I don't want to neg this space. We should be doing this. And there are some very good examples. One off the top of my head is Vanna. And I think they understand data, and so they're going to be properly successful in that space. It your data individually for most use cases is actually not valuable. So that's one of the common misunderstandings. There's a game theory problem here, which is if I'm a curator of data and I'm building, say, large machine learning models, AI models, or even doing traditional data analysis, if I have a subset of users that want to opt out of that, usually at scale, that's totally not a problem for me. So from a game theory perspective, I'll just take the users that want to opt in 99% of the time. So from a game theory perspective, the users that want to opt out don't matter. They don't have any value to me, so I'm not going to pay them. The second thing is that your data individually, you may view it as valuable, but it's not valuable from an analysis standpoint as an individual under normal circumstances. So I have plenty of data. I do the analysis. And if you're not in the data set, that's fine. So again, I'm not going to pay you. So this is just simply a fundamental value proposition problem. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean when I have, say, an AI model that I don't need my data, right, to put into the model to say where do I fit, right? So if I'm doing like a health model, for example, I need my data to figure out where I fit in there. My data now becomes valuable to me, but it's not necessarily valuable to the provider in aggregate, the controller in aggregate.
So we're seeing a lot of different acronyms getting used about data privacy. FHE, fully homomorphic encryption, TEAS, trusted execution environments. Are they actually actionable things right now in AI?
Well, that's a broader question. So there are actionable things that we can do in AI. Again, I'm very pro having platforms that try to promote data privacy, but the problems of data are significantly complex. So, for example, a lot of the data that is important about you is emitted by you but not owned by you. This is metadata, right? So I can tell a lot about what's going on from the metadata that you emit. That's not data that you own, and it's data that someone else controls. So all of these concepts really come down to sovereignty and not ownership, right? So that's why we work in the sovereignty space with our partners, and really talk much more about sovereignty when we're talking about data. Is do you control those emissions, right? Yeah. How much of them do you control? Do you control where they go? Is that even possible, right? Now, keep in mind, we're entering a massive accelerated stage of growth right now. If you know where we are on the curve of AI acceleration, right? Like if you think we're at the inflection point, that was a year ago. That was 18 months ago for most of those things. We're way up on that curve now. So the more data is being generated at a geometric pace than ever before, geometrically accelerating pace. So, and most of this data is not data you could ever claim ownership over, but you might be able to get some control of some of it, right?
So when we're talking about the control, ownership, and sovereignty of data, we have different protocols out there that provide edge compute. People at home can provide compute for inference for AI agents, but Manifest comes at it a little different angle of like enterprise grade data center quality compute, is that setting a precedent for better control and ownership of data?
Well, if done correctly. So this has actually been an issue with most things that we've tried to do in blockchain is if you aren't starting at fundamental layers of hardware, if you aren't starting at L0, you've got a lot of really significant data privacy and sovereignty problems if you're just implementing from the top of the stack down. There's a lot of promising work going on in ZK and other technologies. There's a lot of work going on with various types of trusted computing platforms. A lot of these are about access controls and encryption. That doesn't necessarily directly translate to data privacy in the way that you would think it would, especially with AI agents. So imagine a world where there's 1,000 AI agents running every aspect of your life. You have a super agent, which is running all of those agents. And those agents are collecting and calculating massive amounts of metadata about you. Many times, I actually don't need to know the data that you are attempting to hide from me through encryption and these methods. I know everything I need to know by the metadata that you accrete around you in your data accretion disk, right? If you think a lot, kind of a black hole concept, right? Even if I have perfect encryption of my data, all of the products I use, all of the agents I'm going to be using, the agents that are going to be running my life, my finances, controlling all my assets, controlling all of my comms. I'm going to be able to correlate most of the data about you from that. So what really becomes important is sovereignty in this case, that I have control of those AI agents, and I have control of them whether or not information about me in any way leaks, right? Or is calculated by other AI agents from a metadata standpoint. So these AI agents, you got to understand, they're going to be faster at everything, and they're going to swarm anything that they want. So if someone wants to know something about you in the future, or make something up about you in the future that's not true, swarming AI agents are going to be able to do that across the entire spectrum of information production. So it's more about sovereignty over the super agent that runs the agents that run your life, because the information is going to be very difficult to protect. So if you're worried about protecting your data versus sovereignty, worry about sovereignty first. Right?
So that's a little bit of a bleaker perspective versus what like everyone likes to talk about, like where AI is going to make everyone's life better in some way, shape, or form. But then there's really cool projects like Venice or Morpheus that work to like give a little bit more ownership and control into people's hands of their data that they're using AI for. Now you're talking about a super agent, or what we've talked, named, personal AI agent in some way, shape, or form. What is something that someone can do today to sort of protect themselves or prepare?
Well, so let's start with, I don't think that's actually a bleak perspective, because again, if you're I'm going to combine the two of these two things into one answer. The thing that you can do right now is get really familiar with agent frameworks, get really familiar with running agents that operate on your behalf. If you aren't already doing this, you're already behind the curve, right? So get into AI, get into AI agents, get on the leading edge of how this is working, right? And get comfortable with AI and AI agents running parts of your life, because this is going to happen whether you want it to or not, right? Make sure those AI agents are sovereign, That is the key. There will be many cases in which you will not be able to control your data, and you will not be able to control the metadata that will reveal your data, whether you encrypt it or hide it or not. That problem is going to get worse. So I'm not here to tell you it's going to get better. It's not. It's going to get worse. But what you can do about it is grab AI agent platforms, you learn to use them, make sure they're sovereign platforms so that you control the AI, and then start getting into the zone of establishing control, right? Forget about ownership, forget about derivative rights, forget about making revenue off of that. You know, not that those aren't noble goals, right? And there's lots of great platforms, again, as I already said, that are trying to do that. But practically speaking, right now, that's not going to help you. That's a long tail thing. What's coming for you really, really fast is AI and AI agents that are going to run everything about your life around you. And that's going to happen whether you like it or not. So you have to just be prepared for that reality. And I don't think that's bleak, because this is also incredibly empowering. If you do this correctly, your health will be better than it's ever been. Your mental status will be better than it's ever been. Your wealth will be better than it's ever been if you do it correctly. So you're empowered. This is an age of empowerment. But if you do not do it correctly, if you ignore it, then putting your data in a data privacy platform by itself, that's not going to do anything, right? And again, not negging those platforms. Love that they exist, partner with many of them. They're great, but it's not going to help as an individual item.
So before we wrap up, we want to just shout out to ETHDenver having us here to talk about this today, sort of covering this hot topic as the first speaker of the day today. Before we wrap up with last thoughts,
sure.
One of the last things that we ran through too quickly, in my opinion, who are you and what's your history?
Right. So I'm a neuroscientist. I started about 35 years ago in AI after being in neuroscience for a bit. Then spent a lot of my career building sovereign infrastructure systems throughout the world. So when I saw Bitcoin in January 2010, became one of the early Bitcoin miners, I really viewed blockchain and Bitcoin and associated platforms as large-scale behavior modification devices. I never really paid attention to the artificial money part. I know that's what everybody's kind of really into, but I looked them as large-scale behavior modification devices, so protocols. So for me, I've been on a 14-year journey since then of building fundamental blockchain infrastructure as an extension of getting to sovereign AI, right? So for me, my whole life has been AI and neuroscience. So I've always wanted true sovereign AI platforms for people. And here we are at the day that many of us old timers in AI have been waiting for, where we're actually at escape velocity, right, for a lot of this technology. So we're finally here. I'm excited that we're finally here. I'm actually really optimistic for the future. But I'm also a hardcore realist. I've been through all these cycles many, many times. And this does not turn out the way you think it's going to turn out most of the time. So get ready for not knowing how it's going to turn out as well. Rethink what you think time is, rethink what you think acceleration is, rethink what you think data is, rethink what you think ownership and sovereignty are. This is an age to rethink about the fundamentals of how your lives have worked related to data up to this point, because everything is going to change. We are entering a new epoch. And at each one of those epoch changes, all the old rulers disappeared. and a new class emerged, and that's what's happening now.
Awesome. Thank you. And for those that don't know, for some reason, my name is Player1Taco, and I talk about what other people do. You can talk to Eric over there if you have any further questions. Thank you, everyone.